we're going to talk about another wild lady, which I love her. Her name is Gertrude Legendre, and that is Gertie. Gertie is born here in Aiken, South Carolina, and she is raised up north. She's part of the Sanford family. International diplomats. They are very big names in carpets. They also have here in Sanford, Florida. That's named after them. They started that. So she, growing up in New York, she runs with the big wigs. The Vanderbilts, the Roosevelts, Patton, F. Fitzgerald, Hemingway. Those are the people that she is growing up with. And they always describe her as that she is just as comfortable in a dress as she is in a hunting outfit. And Gertie liked to hunt. It was one of the things that she did. She was such a renowned hunter that National Geographic would follow her around on a couple of her hunting trips and do documentaries about her at that point in time. She meets her husband, Sidney. He's in the top picture. He's the gentleman standing right next to her in that top picture on one of her hunting trips. And they end up getting married. And so this is a couple pictures of them here. I think both of them are here in South Carolina. They end up buying Midway, which is the picture that Beth showed you a little bit earlier. When they buy it, it is in need of a lot of TLC and a lot of repair. So they start redoing it, and they have what you think of an old plantation site. They have horses and cattle and things like that. But because both of them were big hunters, they also had some unusual animals on their plantation. They had a gorilla and they had an ape. So they were bringing in different types of monkeys back. So these were the animals that they had out there. Besides redoing that plantation, they bought a supermarket up in Somerville, and they opened a couple of movie theaters in Somerville. One of them was called The Jungle, and what she did is she used, this is really bad, all those animals that she killed, she ended up using those heads and putting them around in the movie theater at that point in time. World War II starts, and Sidney decides that he is going to enlist. He's stationed, he enlists with the Navy. His first station is here in Charleston. We have the Navy office was down right on East Battery. He worked there for a little bit. Then he gets transferred to DC. Gertie goes with him to DC, and then he gets transferred to Hawaii, and she's not allowed to go with him for Hawaii. So she's stuck in DC, and she decides, I'm bored, I want to do something. What am I going to do? So she joins a group called the Office of Strategic Services, or they nicknamed it the Oh So Secret. This was the precursor to the CIA, and so it was really kind of what you call the first spy ring, which is kind of cool. Gertie's great-grandfather was the spy master for Abraham Lincoln, so it kind of seems to run in the family there. She starts in the DC office. She's a file clerk. Then she moves up to the telegraph office. She's like, kind of bored. I don't really have much to do. Luckily for her, she gets transferred over to the London office. And so she is over there, and with Gertie, once you get to know her personality, she's a lady that doesn't let anything stop her from having a good time. She loved to throw dinner parties, and it didn't matter that London was being bombed. She said she had it figured out. She could hear the bomb, and she could tell if it was coming towards her house and if they needed to get underneath the tables. And so they kept doing those dinner parties. You'd think that would be a lot of excitement for her, but no, she was still really bored. After France is liberated, she gets a transfer over to the French office over in Paris. When she arrives there, the office isn't ready, so she's got some free time on her hands. She runs into a gentleman named Bob Jennings, and she and Bob knew each other from DC, and they're like, well, we got a bunch of free time, what are we gonna do? And she says, you know, we're really not that far away from the heart of the battle. Let's go see where the war is happening. I want to go check it out. Dumb idea, right? So she and Bob decide that they're going to go on a little adventure. They get a car and they're driving out. Now, unfortunately, they get a flat tire and they end up staying in this small little town. That night while they're eating dinner, they run into a major and his driver, and they're like, oh, what are y'all doing out here? And they're like, we're really trying to find the front line. And he goes, well, I'm going there tomorrow. Why don't you all come with us? She's like, yes, this is great. Let's do that. So she and Bob hop in the car the next day, and they're heading out to the front line. Now, if you know anything about war, the front line is not a stagnant thing. It moves a lot. And so they don't realize that the front line has moved, and all of a sudden they're in the middle of the front line. And they're being shot at by Germans, and these machine guns are going all around them, and they are like ending up like hiding behind the car. Unfortunately, the major and his driver are both hit. They are both wounded to that, and then they realize that they are all in big trouble, so they end up surrendering. Gertie is the one that says we need to rip up anything that tells who we are, you know. So she rips up her OSS ID and everything like that. They grab all four of them, they take them behind the line, and they start interrogating them. Unfortunately for the major and his driver, they were thrown in prison camps, and both of those gentlemen would lose their lives from the wounds that they received that day. But Gertie and Bob are sent around Germany. They go from prison cell to prison cell. Some of them are really nice. Some of them are like that castle up there. Other ones are flea-infested places. You know, she goes 6 months with wearing her uniform. Every once in a while, she'll be able to wash her hair, but she really never gets to bathe. So they vary in all these things. And meanwhile, the OSS is really worried about it because they're afraid if she starts singing and tells them what she was doing, that they will know that what's going on, especially because the French resistance is now being able to come up. But Gertie plays the role. She says, I'm just an ambassador, I'm just a translator for the U.S. Embassy. I learned French, you know, that's what I'm here. I don't know what I was doing. I was just riding with them, I'm going to do this. And that's what she kept playing, and that's what she kept playing, was that role. So they would never really question her. The wild thing, back here in the United States, her husband Sidney, he's supposed to meet her in D.C. On vacation, and he gets there and he can't figure out where Gertie is. No one has a clue where Gertie is. So they send out this telegraph that you're looking at up there, and it is read on the radio and saying that the first woman captured in World War II was a socialite from New York. And that's how he learns his wife is in prison over in England, over in France, really, at that time. They keep moving her from all these times, and they're realizing they move her further and further into Germany, and they're realizing they're not getting what they want from her. It's not working, these interrogations. So they decide they're going to try to go at it a different way. And so they bring in this gentleman. His name is Gertrude. He was living here in the United States for about 18 years. He goes home supposedly for a vacation, and then when he's over there, World War II starts, and Germany forces him to become part of the Nazi army. Sort of true, sort of not. He really lived in New York for 18 years, but when he got to Germany, he signed up to fight for the Germans on that side. So he's really not interrogating Gertie. He's really trying to be your friend. These conversations start having over wine. You know what happens when you drink a lot of wine. She starts opening her mouth. And she really opens it, not giving up the secrets of the OSS, but she starts telling him, hey, I know Patton, you know? Bain ribs, you know? And these guys are going, oh, wait a minute, you know, there's some political clout with her. We can't decide what we want to do. The Gestapo hears about this, and they decide that they really aren't going to let her go. They want to use her some way politically or as propaganda. So they keep moving her in. The one thing that between she and Gertrude, and that she's really scared of the Gestapo. And she's like, you know, and he goes, don't worry, I won't let them get you. So she's like, okay. All of a sudden, one day, she's yanked away, and she's off into another place. She runs into Gertrude a little bit later, just briefly. He kind of passes her, and he kind of makes these weird comments, and she's like, I don't know what that means. And then a couple days after that, a gentleman shows up. His name is Mr. Gay. And Mr. Gay goes, I'm supposed to transport you further into Germany, but I'm going to take you to Franklin, and I'm going to help you escape. And she's like, okay. So what he does, he goes, just the thing is, if I help you escape, make sure if you get caught, you don't tell him it was a German helping you. You tell him it was somebody from the French resistance or something like that. And she's like, Okay, that sounds like a good idea. So the plan is that he's going to drop her at this train station, and the train is going to come in across the border from Switzerland into Germany, and then she is going to get on the train, and it's supposed to go across the border, and then she'll be in Switzerland, and she'll be free at that time. So he tells her, when the train unloads, you just kind of start walking up and go, oh, I forgot my purse, and run back on the train, and you hide. And that's what she does. She gets on the train, she hides, and so the conductor, train's completely empty, and he starts walking down through all the carts, looking for people, everything like that. She hears him coming, so she decides she's going to hide into the bathroom. And so amazingly enough, for whatever reason, he doesn't open that bathroom door. So she feels the train start going, and it starts going. She starts going across the border, and it stops. And so she kind of peeks herself out, makes sure everything's okay. She gets off the train, and she goes, oh my gosh, the border's over there. She's 150 yards away from the border. Mr. Gay had it completely wrong. He thought it was going across the border, but they were just putting it out of service on the German side, and they were going to clean it over there. So she's looking across, and she's like, what am I going to do? And so she's sneaking between all the trains, and she decides, okay, I'm going to run. So she starts running. Meanwhile, the German soldiers see her, and they are running next to her. And she describes it that one of the soldiers comes right up next to her, and he has the gun, the part of the gun in her ribs, and she can feel it. And so as she's running, she's screaming, American passport, American passport. And amazingly enough, she runs through that little gate that you see right there, and they do not shoot her. And to this day, she describes it. She goes, I have no clue as to why they didn't shoot me that day. I don't know if they were part of it, or they were confused that a woman was running. I mean, I have no clue. But she makes it back to Paris for her 43rd birthday. Important deal. It's an important thing. I told you she's a partier. So when she is being transferred throughout Germany and for France too, she sees the destitute, she sees people starving, and it really upsets her. And she comes back to the United States, and she's like, I've got to do something about this. And so what she does is she establishes the Medway Plan. Before I get there, these are some fun pictures too. The top one is that uniform that she wore for 6 months up there. That is a sketch that one of her wardens, I guess, what did you call one of the people who were watching her, one of the different prisons, sketched her, and there is her passport and her dog tags. So I thought those were kind of fun. So here's Medway, different view of it. But she calls it the Medway Plan, and what it is that you attach a city here in the United States with a city in Europe that needs help. And it's city to city, and you, as this local city, send it over whatever supplies you can. Food, clothing, you name it, you send it. The first city that it is Charleston. So we are paired with a little town called on Flores d'Orne, which is in Normandy, and we became their partner city. And so we started sending our goods to them. This program grows astronomically. By the time they're done, there'll be 350 cities paired in the United States and over in Europe at that time. And to raise funds for it, it really becomes a big deal. Like, they had an auction for one of them, and you could bid on Judy Garland coming to your house and sing. So not too shabby. So it really becomes a big deal. Which is really cool is that little town in France, they have named a little piazza in honor of Charleston, and they do fly that American flag there today. And in 2017, we had the delegation come here to Charleston, and down along the waterfront, kind of like where North Argers and Concord Street is, we have a marker honoring that relationship that we had at that point in time. Now, Gosselin, after the war is done, he tries to petition to come back in the United States, and he does have his wife and children are allowed to come back first because his children were born here. Gertie does write him a letter and saying, you know, he was a good man, you know, he was living here in the United States, and he, you know, standing up for him. In his application to come back, in his visa, he writes that he was never joined the Nazi Party and was never an officer in that party, which were both lies. But guess what? He got to come back to the United States. He ends up moving to Columbia. He will work for Sidney's brother in a bottling facility. facility up in Columbia. She and Goshwin would stay in touch probably about once a year. They would get together for lunch, but he would always send her red roses on Christmas, and that was the way they stayed in touch. Unfortunately, after the 3 years after the war, Sydney will die of a heart attack. Gertie will remarry, and it will be not a very good marriage. It will only last 5 years for her. She starts changing too. She still continues to hunt until she's back in her 50s, and then she decides, you know, hunting is bad, and she becomes an animal conservationist. But here, of course, there's the thing, out at Medway there, they're all hunting, you can see them. But Medway she is the socialite here in South Carolina. She would have Bing Crosby stay out at Medway out there for her. But the biggest deal is the picture on the left. She did this New Year's Eve party, which I am so jealous because I really want to go. Every year was a different theme. And so this one, it looks like it's Arabian. One time they had a circus theme, and she rode in on an elephant. And then this one lady talks about it that she was doing it for over 40 years because this lady went to 40 New Year's Eve parties with her. And those Charlestonians would come down to downtown Charleston and go to the Dock Street Theater and raid their costume box because every year was something different at that point in time. So she does all these things. She also continues to travel. Her last trip she will make when she is 96 years old. She will go to Morocco, and then unfortunately she ends up suffering a stroke, and she'll be in a wheelchair for the rest of her life at that point in time. Besides giving up hunting animals in her 50s, she becomes a conservationist. Have you all heard of the Coastal Conservation League? Yeah. You know all that is? She's one of those founders, starting that organization, and Medway Plantation does have a conservation easement on it. So it will always stay in its natural thing. So the house will be there, but no one can ever divide it down or anything like that at that point in time. There's her, and I love her. She's out at Medway in that 1973 picture. So her last years of her life, she will not be very involved with things. You know, she passes away at the age of 97 years old. And the wild thing is that she dies on the exact same day that her husband Sydney did. So they are both buried out at Medway. Sydney is buried there, and then Gertie was cremated, so her ashes are spread across that at that point in time. Medway is no longer in their family. It is owned, it was sold to a private individual, and it was sold in 2012 by their daughter, Boinka. And you're going, wait a minute, she has a daughter? She and Sydney really had 2 daughters. And to be honest, they were the worst parents possible. It would be so bad that half the time they would spend traveling. So their 2 daughters were raised with their nanny. In fact, Boinka says that her mother being motherhood did nothing to impinge on her quest for adventure. One night there was a knock at the front door, and the governess opens it, and she turns to her and says, "Say hello to your mother, Bo." And I thought, who is this woman? So even when they were in town, even if they weren't traveling, the children had their own house at Medway. And so she really never let being a parent involve in what she wanted to do at that point in time. She is a much better grandmother. Her son is named Peter Manigault, and anybody heard of Garden and Gun magazine? That's her grandson. And so she was very close with her grandkids and everything like that. Gertie is one of those people that is breaking all the molds, huh? Can you imagine? I think they really need to make a movie about her. You know? But these 3 ladies, in their own way, have done some things that really have changed the world that we as women live in today. And I thank you all very much for your time.